let's move on to session 2. Dr. Aramya.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Balasubramaniam sir and Gangadharan sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Bye.
Now we'll be just moving on to the Aahara session. So just giving an introduction. In this session, we actually bring to you the traditional recipes of different parts of the country, different countries, so that we know that all of our traditional recipes have a connect to the place we are in, and the season and the type of food that we intake. Everything has a connect to the people who live in different countries, and we always believe that these are being based on some of these Ayurvedic principles. So here is it's an initiative to bring to you these traditional recipes of different parts of the world, so that it can be initiated, but we let us understand also in deep why it is being used, when it should be used, and how it is being used. So I begin with today we have the first through a video, and today's presentation will be in the form of video or as live presentation. So the first one we go for Miss Nitja Rupa. She's part of the Iskra movement in Latvia, and she's from Riga, Latvia, with great knowledge about the local medicine herbs and their use form for to their ancestors, who for centuries themselves used in food and medicine. She graduated from Moscow PAH, the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences, assistant therapist, and she's been part of the AVP Baltics course with Dr. Somit Kumar in Latvia. So we just have a video which has been sent from Latvia. So over to the video being shared.
Namaste!
Namaste!
Mēs jūs sveicinām no Latvijas.
Greetings from Latvia.
Mēs gribam jums izstāstīt par to, ar ko atšķirās mūsu zemes gadalaiki, kā viņi mainās.
We want to talk and tell and discuss also some things about our nature, about for our seasons, which is like very different, and we want to share with this information to you.
Katrs gadalaiks ir ļoti skaists.
Every season in Latvia, in Europe, is very beautiful.
Un Latvija atšķirās dabā ar to, ka viņai ļoti izteiksmīgi 4 gada laiki.
Latvia, in like our location, we can be very happy because we have 4 seasons. We have summer, we have autumn, we have spring.
Ļoti liela atšķirība šiem gadalaikiem ir saistīti ar saules ietu pa mūsu debesīm.
Our seasons is very connected with sun, how the sun is going around to the earth, also include to our location.
Vasarā mūsu diena ilgst 19 stundas.
Summer, our day is 90 hours.
Un nakts ilgst tikai kādas 4 stundas.
And the night is only 4 hours long.
Bet rudenī, kas šobrīd ir, mūsu samazinājies ļoti dienas garums. Mums šobrīd ilgst diena tikai kādas 7 stundas.
But now, autumn, we have day long only 7 hours.
Un pārējo laiku tas ir tāda migla, tas ir tāda tumša un nesaprotams apgaismojums.
Like in the day, we have more fog, rain, wind. Mostly days we don't have the sun. The sun we have only a few days in a month.
Un tieši šī starpības starp pārējām, pieņemsim, zonām, kas ir, tas ir tieši šī krasa, gaismas un saules maiņa.
Like our location is different with this sun, and that we don't have this sun and also the sun is changing in different seasons.
Mums ir ļoti ātri beidzās vasara, pienāk rudens,
We have very short summer and very fast come autumn and winter.
un rezultātā mums veidojas, ka mums pārtikai jāparūpējas tā, lai mums pietiek visai ziemai.
So it's mean that we need to take care all summer and also some weeks in the autumn how we will prepare the food for the winter.
Un tieši tāpēc es gribu iepazīstināt ar mūsu svarīgākiem ēdienu kartes tādiem ļoti svarīgām sastāvdaļām ēdienu kartes.
That's why we want to discuss and show to you that our main important food items in our menu, which is very important in this darkest time and also in winter time when also we have frozen and snow.
Es domāju, ka jūs ļoti labi saprotiet to, ka šajā rudens vēsajā un bez saules gaismas periodā mums vajag saglabāt, lai mums ir ēdiens silts un lai viņš arī uztur tādu labu siltumu iekšā.
So according also to Ayurveda, that also says that we need to take our local food and also warm food. So it means that we need to prepare a lot of items like in fermented process, and also we need to get these vegetables from the garden to our go downs, and also we can prepare food that we will eat later after maybe some months.
Un viena no pirmajām un pamatā ēdienu, tas ir saistīts ar graudiem.
And one main of the thing what we need to eat, and also it's very important in our menu, it is grains.
Un es nosaukšu, kādi mums ir šajā vietā aug graudi. Tas ir kvieši, bet ne sevišķi daudz lielā apmērā viņiem aug. Mums ir rudzi un mums ir mieži.
So in our menu we have 4 main grains and fiber. It's wheat, rye, barley and buckwheat.
Arī pie mums aug ļoti Indijā maz pazīstams tāds graudiņš, kas saucas griķi.
In India, we are not sure, but in our location in Latvia, we are growing buckwheat.
Un viņš ir atšķirās no pārējiem graudiem ar to, ka viņu var ēst kādaši. Viņš īstenībā neskaitās grauds.
The difference between other 3 grains, which is like wheat, rye and barley, they are like a seed, which they are not, we are not eating in Ekadashi, but this our buckwheat, it's like more fiber, and that we can eat, so we can't say that it is like seed.
Nākamais, ko es gribētu pastāstīt par graudiem, ka tieši tāpēc, ka mums ir vasara ļoti īsa, mūsu graudi līdz galam nepaspēja nobriest līdz rudenim.
We have also in same time the problem that our grains till autumn, they are not getting totally 100% sure ready. They have 2 months time that they can grow in earth, under the earth.
Un tieši tāpēc ir ļoti īpatnēja tāda gatavošanas paņēmiens, ka mēs liekam graudus, lai viņi izžūst ļoti un vajag viņam izgulēt vismaz 2 mēneši.
So when after the grains are ready, we are taking out from the ground, and we will keep for 2 months for drying. After 2 months only we can eat that. Otherwise the grain is not ready, and there is that inside the small fermented thing what is not allowed. It's allowed to eat, but it's not good for our digestion and our health.
Un tieši tāpēc ir ļoti interesants, ļoti sens paņēmiens, ka mūsu senči to darīja. Mēs graudus pēc 2 mēnešiem liekam mērcēt un pēc tam no viņiem gatavojam, kad mēs viņus samaļām.
So after the 2 months when these grains are dry, totally dry, we are putting in the water, we are keeping some while in the water, and then we are like squeezing and making like a paste. And then from this paste, of course, we are grinding that wet grains, and then we can make different type of food items.
Nākamais, kas ir ļoti svarīgi, saprast, ka mēs ar tiem graudiem necepam tikai maizi vai necepam tikai kaut kādu konditoriju. Mēs izveidojam no viņas ļoti dažādus ēdienus.
From these grains, we are not only making the bread, some bakery things or pancakes. Actually, we can make so many food items from them to mix it to other vegetables, like for example potatoes, carrots. So the menu will from the grains can be very big and very full with vitamins.
Nākamais, kas ir ļoti svarīgi jums pastāstīt, ar ko atšķirās mūsu zemes ēdienkarte, tas ir ogas. Ja pieņemsim Indijā ļoti izplatīti augļi un viņi ir saldi pēc garšas, mūsu zemē vissvarīgākais ir tieši ogas.
Like for example, in India, there is so many lot of fruits and they are sweet. But our thing is that we have from the fruits actually only berries. And the berries we can get only in the summer and a little bit in the autumn time. And mostly they are sour, and it means that we have a lot of kapha.
Nākamais, ko mēs darām ar tām ogām, arī ļoti sena un ļoti šeit izplatīta tehnoloģija. Mēs fermentējam ogu sulas.
So we are also fermenting and getting from the berries and preparing them for the winter.
Mēs viņus varētu nosaukt par šķidrām garšvielām.
These berries, we can say that
Okay, that was a video from Latvia. We'll now go forward with the video from Larisa, Ambrogio. She's a translator and interpreter from Argentina. She's joined us, but we have the video and she'll be joining as a panelist in the panel discussion. Her first encounter with Ayurveda was in 2013 when she attended the intense course on Ayurveda in AV, Mangere. In 2014, she became an interpreter of the same course. She claims that Ayurveda opened her eyes to a new perspective of life, allowing her to take life-changing decisions and to integrate her profession as an interpreter, passion for cooking, and a training in Ayurvedic massage. She works as a public service interpreter and is a faculty of the Medical Sciences of Rosario and for the Nicaragua course. She is also the founding member of Agneya. So happy to have you boarding with us, Larisa. And over to the video of Ms. Larisa.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. Before talking about our topic today, I'd like to give you a short introduction. Our history as a country is not very old. Argentina was born about 200 years ago and populated by immigrants from different parts of the world, especially from Europe. With them, they brought their culture, their traditions, among which we find food. On the other hand, before the coming of migratory waves, this land had been conquered after the discovery of America. And as a result of this, American natives' culture and traditions were practically erased and replaced by another one. An example of this was the introduction of rice and wheat, which took over the role of maize, a plant which was considered as a sacred plant for natives. Then when immigrants introduced their dietary habits from the Northern Hemisphere, this resulted many times in what in Ayurveda is called like a wrongful combination. For example, Christmas takes place in the peak of summer for Argentina, and still we celebrated having heavy winter meals, meat, pork, nuts, nuggets, alcohol, etc. And that is because that's the way it is celebrated in winter countries. Another example of this is pizza, which is very popular in Argentina. While in Italy, it is a thin layer of whole wheat bread that accompanies the topping of fresh, seasonal and local ingredients and sometimes some fresh and soft cheese. For us, pizza is more of a white bread with canned tomato sauce and loads of greasy cheese. So taking this into consideration, we choose dishes made with ingredients that our natives would have used. The first one is called carbonada, Argentina. Carbonada is a kind of a stew. It is a savory dish. In terms of its properties, it's guna, it's quite heavy because it is mainly madura rasa. We use to make it mostly tubers and root vegetables, fresh wheat corn, which is heavier to digest than the dry one, and pumpkin or butternut squash. It is a winter dish, and historically it was eaten by countrymen and women who worked the land long hours, plowing crops, working with animals, and they needed to recover strength. And this, there is non-vegetarian version as well. I opted to do the vegetarian one today. And though currently it had been eaten any part of the country, it's originally from areas where there is a high thermic amplitude. So winters are very hard, summers are very hard, and in summertime, the day is hot, but nights are cold. And this corresponds to the northwest and west areas in the country. What do we need to make carbonada? So as I said before, tubes and root vegetables like sweet potatoes, carrots, green onions and onions for some flavor, the butternut squash, the fresh corn, paprika, and some herbs, and some broth as well. So it's very easy to prepare. The first thing we do is to cut and hollow the pumpkin, and with some salts, and I personally put some ghee in it. We roast it until it's soft, and we make also the broth in the meantime by chopping the garlic, onion, celery, carrots, and green onion, some parsley. We put it water to boil, then we add the ingredients, and in 5 minutes it's done. While we cook the broth, we also pan fry the onion and garlic until it's transparent. Then we add the rest of the peppers, that here I used not only red and green, but also some yellow pepper for color. And once this preparation is done, we can add the paprika. As carbonada actually comes from the word carbon, which is carbon, the way that's used, food was used to cook in the old times, I used paprika, smoked paprika, just to resemble that smoky flavor of the old way of cooking. So after that, we cover the preparation with broth, and to that we put the chopped sweet corn, sweet potato, and what else? And carrots, and we let them to cook. And when they are almost ready, we fill the pumpkin, which should be already tender. We take it to roast some 20-30 minutes so that the flavors integrate, and this is the result. So it's very easy, it's very comfy, very nutritious dish, and that is why it's mainly a winter dish. And we eat it basically as traditionally in the rest of the country in festive days, like in the Day of Independence or some national day, which are generally in winter time. Then, as I had some extra broth, and I wanted to introduce you with some quinoa, which is also a millet very common in the diet of the northwestern people in Argentina. I choose to do a simple soup, as quinoa is slightly aggravating vata when combined with a broth which is jala and it's more snigda. This will contrarrest or balance the imbalancing vata effect of quinoa. So it's very easily made as well. We only have to be sure to rinse the quinoa until the water is clear. You will see it here in this. This is the first, I just put water here. I rinsed it like 4 or 5 times, maybe 7, 8, like the way you do with rice, and until the water becomes this clear, because otherwise it will taste a bit bitter. So once the broth is made, you just put the quinoa to the broth, cook for 5 minutes, and that's it. And it's really, it's crunchy and at the same time very soft millet. It's really, really good. And finally, we've done also mazamorra. Mazamorra is a dessert, so it's a sweet dish. Typically from South American countries in general, especially from the Andean region. In Argentina, after the European migration, its consumption started to decrease, and it was left more to the country areas or the northwest areas as well. Though it is very popular dessert, and it's in terms of Ayurvedic perspective, it is Madura rasa mainly, because it's done with corn, dry corn, sugar and milk. It's also guru, and it's ideal for children, because children, as they are in their kapha stage of life, they need this nutritious part, and also for aged people, because they are in their vata stage of life. So this dessert, which is warm and guru and madura, contrarrests that vata. Something that I would like to mention as well is that the difference between this corn, which is, as you will see here, is white maize. It is more easily digested than the sweet corn used in carbonara, because the sweet corn in carbonara, as it is fresh, it tends to be to have the qualities more of a vegetable. Instead here, white maize being dry is more like a cereal. So what do we need to make this mazamorra? White maize, milk, sugar, and cinnamon. What you see here is just an example of the variety, the huge variety of maize that there are in America, and that due to the fact of the conquer and the migration, this was reduced to countries such as, the northern part of Chile, the northern part of Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, and all the Andean countries. How do we prepare mazamorra? It's very easy as well. We have to first rinse the maize and soak it overnight, as you can see here. Then we have to cook it over a mild flame until it softens. In this case, we added some clove to contribute some flavor and to also contribute to its digestion. And we have to cook it in a mild flame until it is soft, as you can see here. When it is soft, we strain it, let it cool, and set it aside without without throwing away the water. Once the maize is cooked, we start cooking the milk. So we put the milk to boil, and in this case, instead of doing the whole amount of milk, we mixed half the amount of milk with half the amount of the cooking water. So this is what is boiling here. Once this combination of milk and cooking water is started to boil, we add then the corn, which is already softened, the sugar and the cinnamon. We cook it over a quarter of an hour or until it is thick, stirring regularly. And when it is thick, we remove it from the flame and we serve it and just enjoy it. It's really, it's a kind of sweet gruel actually, but made with corn instead of rice. So that's it, our presentation. Thank you very much. This is the result of the first carbonara. Thanks.
Thank you, Larisa. So she'll be joining us for the panel discussion. So we now move on to, thank you. So we now move on to Mr. Bruno Carmo Badrinath Das, who's an associate Naradeva Shala, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Postgraduated as Ayurveda practitioner by Naradeva Shala Institute since 2016. Graduated in Biological Sciences at Unicamp Master in Science Teaching and postgraduated in Clinical Phytotherapy. Attended the Ayurveda courses at AVP in Coimbatore from 2017 and especially he's covered the topics Baishja Kalpana, Aahara, Paka and Stri Roga like that. So very happy to have you here, Badri. So over to you and you can start your screen sharing also. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, everyone. So I'll share my screen. Okay. I hope you can see my screen now. So I'm going to talk a little about traditional food from Brazil. Yes, thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about traditional food from Brazil and Ayurveda. I'm going to first explain a little bit about how traditional habits in Brazil are in general, and then I'm gonna show 2 recipes specifically, and also how we can connect that with Ayurveda, of course. Well, so there are a few principles of Ayurveda that we can see that are working in food traditions in Brazil as well. So we can see from what I'm going to show to you, we have mainly utilization of 6 rasa in a lot of traditional food. We usually have predominance of Madura rasa items as staple food. We have regional differences related to climatic zones. And so we could also relate that to Agni capacity. So we have, for example, prevalence of higher use of spices in hotter places of Brazil, like northeastern region and also northern region, and prevalence of guru food items in colder places, like the southern region of Brazil, for example. We have a prevalence of cooked items, so that's quite a lot like Ayurveda, where we prefer to use cooked food, right? We have a lot of usage of spices, mainly garlic and onion, but also pepper, depending on the region, also cilantro, parsley, chive, and of course, a lot of spices which came after the Europeans arrived. So we have a lot of spices which came actually from India, like black pepper, like cinnamon, like cloves. Nowadays, even cardamom is easily available here. We have usage of cooked butter, and that's really interesting. In some parts of Brazil, we have this bottled butter, which is quite like ghee. I think my colleague Antonio is going to talk a little bit more about it also, because I think his recipe maybe has this, but it's typical from the northeastern region of Brazil, which is a hotter place, you know. We have usage of bitter and astringent drinks after food. We have like this cultural habit of drinking coffee after of course, we know that it is not so okay in terms of nutrition and absorption of nutrients to drink coffee just right after food. But if we think about the flavors, it's really interesting to know that tradition or the common habit has adapted a bitter drink to be used just after food. And it's really common here. We used to have good coffees. There are other kinds of drinks also used, like jurubeba, which is a traditional fruit, really bitter, and from it, it's made a drink also. Often alcoholic drinks also are used in that context, or are used also before the meal, like having a dipana effect. And we have a lot of habits and beliefs related to food, which are quite like Ayurveda. For example, we have the belief, it's a common belief here, of not taking bath after food. Like all the grandmothers tell their grandchildren, don't take bath after food. And that's quite like Ayurveda also. So there's a traditional habit of eating in company of the loved and dear ones. And there is a traditional habit of thanking the divinity, as Brazil is a mainly religious country. So when we talk about food habits in Brazil, it's really hard to be precise about what is tradition in Brazil. We are not going to get into the actual discussion of what is tradition, because that's a long discussion. And so I'm just going to take some parts of food habits and show to you. Well, when we think about indigenous people who lived here before the Portuguese invaders arrived, it's quite impossible to describe all the tribes in a generic way, because there aren't in literature complete descriptions about each tribe's culinary practices. But some things are mainly common to a lot of them, like it's common to prepare only what is going to be eaten. So that is a principle we can relate to Ayurveda, no? Like not eating leftovers, not eating food that has become tamasic. It's common to eat something only when hungry. So that's quite Ayurvedic as well. Anciently, most tribes would eat raw or roasted food. Some tribes with pottery abilities would also cook. So cooking was according to need. Indigenous culinary is simple. There are a few spices used. Many groups, many tribes, many peoples use only pepper and salt, which is recently introduced. So we can see also some usage of spice in these peoples. Some dishes depend on seasonal ingredients. Some harvested roots can be stored. So there is seasonal eating according to the surroundings, and that is also a characteristic we can relate to Ayurveda. One of the few common raw material used is cassava. Of course, it's not eaten raw, but cassava, the cassava root or yucca manihot, which is cultivated and used also as flour. So corn is also present in many tribes. Corn is like an important cereal in America, as we have seen from my colleague's presentation. So corn is cooked as pamonha, which is a form of cooking inside leaves, inside the corn leaves, roasted or as a flour. Indigenous food habits are actually a mix of gathered items, hunted animals, which would be terrestrial and fish, some food production and external acquisitions. Fish is also a staple food for many tribes, and there's gathering of fruits and hunting of small animals which we could say that were and are collected rather than hunted, like turtle. Actually, we call it jabuti, this kind of turtle. Insects, larvae, lizards, ants, also mushrooms, honey, heart of palm. Meat is kind of a secondary item, often roasted, and we know the roasting makes it a little lighter, no? Generally wild pigs, more in tribes from central regions, and they would be used with cassava flour. Also, they would eat, depending on the group, of course, meat of snakes, lizards, alligators, turtles, and its eggs, mostly in Amazon region. So there are a lot of traditional habits, but there are and there were a lot of different groups of indigenous people. So it's not possible to generalize. Well, so in all this, we can see a huge predominance of Madura rasa in the cassava, in the corn, in most of these meats also. So nowadays we can identify in Brazilian culture, in Brazilian food habits, influence of these native indigenous populations, also influence of the Portuguese colonizers, also influence of the African enslaved people who were forcefully brought here by the Portuguese invaders. Also influence from immigrants from many parts of the world, mainly from the 19th and 20th century, when they came, like from Germany, Italy, and Japan, and many other countries, and their descendants, of course. So there are a lot of mixed influences in our food habits. In general, we can see that minimally processed food staples include rice, a variety of beans, and the root cassava manioc. And this cassava is like a great influence of indigenous native populations. So a lot of staples having Madura rasa, we can see here. They would be the basis of everyday main meals, various methods of preparation and cooking, and there's addition of oils. And then we see an element of snigdha as an important thing, seeds, leaves, herbs, and spices, which would give the dipana or pachana effect, which actually is not native to Brazil, but processed wheat products like breads, cakes, biscuits followed relatively recent immigration of people from the Mediterranean region to southern states of Brazil, like Italian people and more Spanish people and Portuguese also. Nationally were uncommon, these wheat products, until well into the second half of 20th century. So nowadays it is quite common for people in Brazil to eat a plate like this with a spaghetti, you know, because of this Italian influence, mainly in southeastern places, southeastern region. But the rice and beans is like our national signature, you know, and this combination is an example of this predominance of Madura and the combination of a cereal and legume. The amount of meat, fish, and other animal products in long-established Brazilian diets would depend on availability, price, income. In the past, these foods were actually usually eaten only in small amounts on a daily basis, and in large quantities only as part of feasts or other special occasions. It was not so common to eat a lot of meat every day. Nowadays, we can see a lot of meat eating, mostly in people who have access to that, of course. Meals prepared and eaten by the family at home, and therefore the habit of eating together, this is quite common in Brazil, as I said, remain an integral part of the Brazilian way of life. And we can see in our classics, Ayurveda classics, this as something which is recommended for a good digestion, for a good, for the right intake of food, like we should eat with the loved ones. Of course, there are a lot of pressures nowadays, which tend to change these habits, like introducing a lot of snacking, a lot of soft drink consumption, and things like that has been jeopardizing this good habit of eating together we used to have as a tradition. Of course, there's a variety of indigenous or established tropical fruits consumed, and commonly they are used as breakfast or as desserts. Now, I would like to show you briefly a believed as a very traditional plate dish, which is the feijoada, made of rice, made of black beans, as you can see on the image, orange, and there are sliced oranges, pork, and now we have a lot of parts of the pork. We have pig ears, feet, dry meat, ribs, sausage, and there is a lot of kinds of sauce. There are a lot of kinds of sausages. Calabresa sausage, pepperoni, a kind of pepperoni sausage. Another sausage named paio, pork loin, bacon. Many parts of pig and processed parts of the pig get into this recipe. Kale, which is often cooked, and a farofa, which is made of cassava flour. Also, there is a spicy seasoning. We can see back there a spicy seasoning, which is usually made of red pepper. And this dish usually also has onions and garlics. So we have also this dipana, necessary dipana effect of these spices, which also impart a richness of flavor, of course. So we have a spiciness, and we have also astringent flavor. So it's a quite complete dish in terms of flavors. There is commonly also the caipirinha. Caipirinha is a traditional drink made of sugarcane liquor, made of lemon and sugar. So sugarcane liquor, lemon, and sugar. And it's usually drank with this dish. So we can see here a great predominance of Madura rasa, usage of the 6 rasas. We have like onions, which has astringent taste. We have garlic, which has 5 tastes. We have the predominance of Madura, mainly on the rice, on the meat. And we even have the amla rasa here on the orange and the lemon. So we have this use of spices for dipana. In fact, we have this beverage as an anupana. Of course, it's wrongly used with ice cubes. We have this often served as a hot dish, of course, and mostly eaten in company of other people. So a lot of Ayurvedic principles we can see in traditionally eating of this. Of course, there is this belief that this is really traditional, but nowadays it's not believed so like that. So many people used to believe that this preparation was created by enslaved African people. So they would take the parts of pork which had been rejected by other people, and then they would make a preparation like this dish. That was the story. However, history researchers have concluded that any part of the pig would be used in those days. So meat was something expensive, was not something that they would throw away, any part of the pig. And so even for rich people. So these items actually were not being discarded by these rich people who owned enslaved people. Owned in terms of that time, of course, which is a horrible term and a horrible thing to do. But well, probably it's more a version of many dishes from Europe, like the puchero from Spain, like the cassoulet from France, like the cazuela from Italy. I don't know if I spelled that right. And the feijoada from Portugal, where they would cook red or white beans with pork or cow's meat. So it's probably more a tradition which was adapted from Europe. And of course, there are native influences like the cassava flour. So the first historical mention to feijoada brasileira, which would be this version, would date from the 19th century. So before that, people would not talk about this dish actually. But nowadays it's recognized as like something very traditional from Brazil. Another dish which is quite traditional or known as traditional is called moqueca. So it's a stew made of shrimps, fish, and many species of fish, like could be even species of shark, coconut milk in some parts of Brazil, bell pepper and tomato. So it can be very spicy depending on the region of Brazil where this is made. It can have cilantro, onion, garlic, pepper, and salt. Well, pepper, here we can have the red pepper and also black pepper. It usually have then the oil, which is an oil brought from the tradition of people, of enslaved people from Africa, who, as I said, were forcibly brought to Brazil to work. So this dish is served with farofa made of cassava. The farofa is this kind of tempered flour, like spiced flour, which is used with the main dish we can see in the picture. And this flour served with the flour of manihot and also with rice. So rice is quite a staple food here nowadays, as you see. So natives from Brazil used to eat fish and cassava flour. The fish would be cooked in its own juice covered with leaves, and that was called moquém. So that is this moquém is an hypothesis of the origin of this dish. But also Portuguese used to eat dishes made of cooked fish, and they would call peixada. And also African enslaved people and their descendants would have added specific ingredients. So you can see that Brazilian cultural habits are quite mixed in terms of their origins. And we see here in Brazil nowadays that this dish is very common, like in a place we call Pará. So there's moqueca paraense, where there is more influence of indigenous people using local fishes, using cassava root derivatives, like we call goma, tucupi, are all derivatives of cassava root, and jambu, which is a plant typical from that region. It's more from northern region of Brazil, as you see in the star in the image. There's the moqueca capixaba, which takes olive oil. Well, now this olive oil is a Portuguese influence, of course. And there's urucum, which is a natural coloring ingredient traditionally used by native indigenous people. So this is from Brazil, actually, this ingredient. And this, as we can see, is more from the southeastern region of Brazil. And there's a famous moqueca baiana also from Bahia, of course. So different states of Brazil, as you see in the map. And this one has bell pepper, coconut milk, and then the oil. So in this one, we can see more African influence. So this is what I wanted to show you. Thank you really much for your attention. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Badri. Thank you for the presentation. I think he has covered also about the, not only of the traditional food, he's also covered about the traditional way of living and what is included in past part of the living also. Thank you. So now we have Antonio Lacerda, who's from ABRA, the Brazilian Association of Ayurveda Board of Directors. He's worked professionally for 40 years with IT in many companies in Brazil, USA, Mexico, England, Argentina, and China. He started the Ayurveda part in 2014, and we did the training in Ayurveda by ABRA. And currently he's on the board of ABRA and the National Ayurveda Self-Regulatory Council, and has been promoting Ayurveda in this country. Very happy to have you, Professor Antonio. So
hey,
please
thank
go
you.
ahead. So first we'll have the video by Professor Antonio, and then we'll go ahead with this presentation.
So, sure, thank you.
Olá, hello, namaste. My name is Antonio Lacerda. I am an Ayurvedic therapist here in Brazil. I am a teacher of basic principles of Ayurveda, and also I am member of the board of directors of ABRA, Brazilian Association of Ayurveda. In this session, I will present a recipe for a traditional dish from the northwest region of Brazil. The dish is called Baião de Dois. You can say Baião of two in a free translation. Just to explain a bit more, Baião is a kind of music and dancing in the northwest region of Brazil. I will present the ingredients that will be used in the preparation of this traditional dish. I also have reduced the list of ingredients of this preparation to be more easier to prepare in other countries. If you want, you can add other ingredients as you wish, especially spices from your region. Well, now that you know the list of ingredients, we can start preparing the dish.
So, Professor Antonio, you can go ahead with the presentation now.
Yeah, sure. So after the beautiful explanation of Bruno about Brazilian food habits, I'm just go through my recipe because Bruno did explain really well Brazilian habits and why this certain kind of food is used here in Brazil. And just to complete the Bruno explanation, Brazil is a large country. In this specific dish is from the northeast region of Brazil. This region is near the equatorial line, so the climate is so hot. It's a kind of all day long summer. There is no winter, no regular winter. You have really a small season of rains. There is almost all the year is a summer. So the name of Baião de Dois, it's a name of a popular dance and music in Northwest region. So the dancers dance really close one with the other. So this is a reference because the rice and the beans is so close and during the preparation of this dish. In fact, this is a really cheap dish to prepare. Use basically rice and beans and the two main components from this dish. And it's cheap because the main part of the population in the Northwest region lives in a really in poverty, and there is no money to buy expensive foods. So this is the list of ingredients, and I use onion, garlic, and the other really common spices. And one special reference here to manteiga de garrafa is bottled butter. It's a kind of Brazilian ghee. It's some people calls the Brazilian ghee, and it's really easy to prepare this dish. So a bit more about the main ingredients. The agulhinha rice is the white rice. It is not a original plant from Brazil, came from other countries. So add the madura raça to the meal is really good, and it's almost 8% of the Brazil use this kind of rice. And fradinho beans and French beans is another kind of really popular beans here in Brazil. Is used in a lot of other types of dishes here in Brazil. And a special reference to manteiga de garrafa, bottled butter, is really common in the Northwest region because they is still liquid, because it's so hot climate, so the butter is still liquid, and so this people put in a bottle, and this is to transport. And as I told, is called for some Brazilian Ayurvedic practitioners as the Brazilian ghee. And queijo coalho, Rennet cheese, is a very traditional cheese because, for example, in the past, the person transport milk in a pouch made of with the stomach from animals, and they store the milk in this pouch. And when the journey is so long, the milk coagulate and create like a kind of cheese in this pouch. Is because this is a really traditional kind of cheese here in Brazil. And my point of view, this is a kind of mishra kudana because it's a mix of shodana dhania, it's rice varieties, and shibi dhania pulses, and that are mixed together and cooked really well. This meal is a bit heavy to digestion, but provides strength, is good for heart, nutritive and carminative. And when you include the spices, is improve the agni. So because this is really important to use pepper and the other spices in this to prepare this meal. In addition, the use of the snigdaguna is provided by the use of the manteiga de garrafa. And this is also butter improves the taste and the digestion and nourish the body. So that's all. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Antonio. It was great to have your presentation also cut short. I understood that you had really gone fast.
Okay.
So thank you. join us for the panel discussion, okay?
Okay, thank you so
So
much.
now we have Bojana Iskra, who's representing Slovenia. She studied English and Spanish language and literature at the Faculty of Arts in Slovenia and has vast experience working as an educator, translator, project manager, and grant writer. And she has been in leadership positions for years as a volunteer in different organizations. She is an educator by nature and an avid herbalist and lifelong learner. And she's deeply interested in helping people to live healthy, well-balanced lifestyle. She enjoys using spices and plants in her cooking and homemade recipes. So over to you, Ms. Bojana. Please share your screen.
Thank you, Dr. Aramya. So hello from Slovenia. As some of you may know, it's a small country in Central Europe, and it borders Italy and Austria, Hungary, and Croatia. And the influence of many neighboring countries on the food of Slovenia can be felt practically everywhere. But maybe for the beginning, just some food staples, Slovenian food staples, like buckwheat. It's used all over Slovenia. It's a low-cost, nutritious dish. Then mushrooms, we have a wide variety of mushrooms in Slovenia. Then pumpkin seed oil, it's highly prized in Slovenia. And I think one of my favorites would be honey, because we only have like 2 million people in Slovenia, but we have about 10,000 beekeepers. So it's widely popular in Slovenia to use honey. And also one of my favorites, many Slovenians look forward to springtime, and because of dandelion. You can make salads from dandelion with cooked potatoes, with cooked beans, and also we make dandelion syrup, which is kind of honey, I would say. Today, I would like to introduce you to a traditional Slovenian dish. It's called jota, which is a sauerkraut and beans hot pot. The name originates from Gaelic word for soup, which is juta, which is then, it became jote, Friulano language, and became jota in Slovenian. It originates from the region of Slovenian Karst, which is southwest of Slovenia, and also from Friuli. I believe Larisa would know that. I've heard that her grandma comes from Friuli, right? And we have 4 seasons in Slovenia, and winter here is very cold. So usually in winter, the housewives had to be quite clever with the use of the ingredients. They would use turnip and cabbage and potatoes and beans. And so usually jota was served hot in winter time, but sometimes it's also cooked in summer and it's served cold. The ingredients, I would say that many of the ingredients for this jota are Slovenian superfoods, and one of them is definitely sauerkraut. It boosts the health benefits. I mean, it's really like fermented cabbage, and it's fermented foods have a lot of probiotic qualities. And our grandmas knew the benefits of homemade ferments because they were an essential tool to make food last longer. And fermented foods, they contain living bacteria that digest ama and replenish enzymes, which create agni. So we would use tomato paste and potatoes and fermented cabbage and olive oil and beans, and also onion and garlic, which are other 2 Slovenian superfoods, black pepper, cumin, bay leaves, and salt. And maybe just to mention about garlic, I think it's a legitimate superfood, and it's highly nutritious, but has very few calories, and it boosts the function of the immune system. So it's like to use garlic in winter and to use onion in winter, it's very helpful, especially here in cold weather. And it can combat sickness, including the cold, and it's so healthy. But it's like if you don't like onion and garlic, you don't need to use it in the recipe. So it can be left out, no problem. And about how to make. So here are the ingredients. And like if you don't like sauerkraut, you can use maybe sour turnip instead, and then use potatoes. So then cooked beans, you can buy it at the store, or you can just then cook it at home. Then you can use 1 to 2 onions and garlic and bay leaves, and of course some of the black pepper and cumin also, and salt and tomato paste and olive oil and water. And how do we make it? So first, you rinse the sauerkraut before cooking, especially just to remove some acidity in case you wouldn't like your jota to be too sour. I usually do that. Then you peel and cut the potatoes, and you slice and cut the onion and garlic. And then you take a big pan and you warm up some olive oil, you add the onion and later garlic, and you saute until onion is golden, but not browned yet. Then you stir in tomato paste, potatoes and sauerkraut, and add water, and then bring it all to a boil. Then I usually add bay leaves, and I reduce heat and simmer uncovered, and I stir it occasionally, just for maybe 20 minutes, or until potatoes and sauerkraut are very tender and the mixture is thick. Well, sometimes I also cook it for a longer time. I just like it to cook for a longer time maybe. And later I add all other ingredients, including the beans. And I stir it well together and cook for another 10 minutes. And what's the result? So it looks like this. I made it yesterday and it was like delicious. So it's really something to enjoy in winter time, which is now. And as I was thinking about Ayurvedic principles connected with Jota, I would say that definitely using local superfoods is here, like sauerkraut and garlic and onion, and also using seasonal foods. Our grandmas would use sauerkraut, potatoes, and beans all the time in winter, and it's very Ayurvedic principle. And to then use cumin and black pepper and bay leaf, like for example, cumin helps with digestive process and it balances all 3 doshas. And then black pepper helps remove toxins and increases appetite. And it's antibacterial, it's antifungal, anti-tumor, and anti-inflammatory nature, which is also important. And bay leaves are warming and they help soothe respiratory problems and indigestion. And as for the garlic, it helps boost the immune system, and it treats colds and flu and purifies the blood and treats infections. And I believe like what the Greek physician Hippocrates said. He said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." And if you look at the ingredients of how you make Jota, you can really see, the food is medicine. And I hope you will try to do it at home and enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bojana. This wonderful presentation. We'll go over to Dr. Somit Kumar, who's present director of AVP Research Foundation, and he's been part of the AVP group since more than a decade, I should say. And he's been the senior medical officer, and he's part of the AVP Baltics. So over to you, sir. He's actually going to represent Turkey, as we wanted Turkey also to be represented. So sir was actually going to give a briefing on why we included all these countries also. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ramya. So I think, see, one thing which we wanted to understand is that all the traditional civilization did had a common understanding of basic dietetics. Now, why I say that? So if you look at, Dr. Gangadharan was telling about that all the traditional civilization first started with specific choice of desha, or where a good healthy civilization can grow with good health. And if you look at very starkingly that it is across equator, either north hemisphere and a south hemisphere, within the moderate climate, where you have moderate rain, moderate sunlight, and moderate wind, not extreme weathers. So wherever we have seen that, whether it is Scandinavian country or other mountainous areas which are, or Canada, or deep south in the south hemisphere, or also where there's mountainous ranges, they are where not the original inhabitant, where people with early civilization lived. So it was basically migratory. So if you look at the basic thought process of dietetics, started with places where you had moderate climate and almost equal sun and dark time, like you have light phase and the dark phase. Now why this is important is because of the circadian rhythm. Now before I would like to take you through the whole concept of dietetics in Ayurveda, now what you can see is that Ayurvedic dietetics was never an Indian dietetics. So the basic principles of dietetics was to customize diet according to people as individual, according to their age, their digestive system, then their geographical location. So if you see, a Brazilian should eat like a Brazilian, a Slovenian should eat like a Slovenian, or Indian should eat like an Indian. And then that geographical location should be in such a way they follow their local satmya, that means ethnic diet, lifestyle, and other practices, and according to their climate. So if you look at most of our people who presented these kind of presentations, they talked about whether this recipe is what and which season to eat, and how to eat, when to eat, who can eat. So these are very important principle of Ayurveda we see across traditional culture of eating and dietetics throughout the globe. Now, again, an important part of dietetics has been the effect of diet on mind. So diet does affect the mind, and I will tell you how. So we were talking about Ayurvedic dietetics in form of 5 elements and 6 tastes. So most of the presenter, since they have an Ayurvedic background, so they talked about rasas. Now, today we are so preoccupied with the macronutrients and micronutrients that we don't see about this whole principle of Shad Rasas, which is basically the backbone of all the recipes across the culture. So if you see, most of their recipes had a predominant madhur rasa, that is sweet taste, like potatoes or rice or such kind of vegetables which are heavy. Then they had tikta, that is bitter and pungent, that is katu rasa, which are spices. Then also a part of astringency in the spice. And then a lot of people had sauerkrauts, like fermented food products. Now, this fermented product is basically amla rasa. So if you look at that, and then you have a salt, different variety of salts you can have. So if you look at all the traditional recipe, they were not based on primarily on carbohydrate, fat, or protein, but based on the 6 tastes. And this is called as functional dietetics in Ayurveda, that all these recipes were made in a proper synergism that yielded a particular physiological effect according to a particular season. Now, why you should have a physiological effect in particular season? Now, each of these tastes in Ayurveda has been attributed with different physiological and anatomical qualities, which I can just summarize here. Now, for example, there was a very specific guideline as to which season what taste food has to be taken. You can talk about in terms of very layman terms, that in winter season, you have to eat which is sweet, sour, and salty, which is more oily and hot in potency. Now, if you look at all the traditional recipes which they explained for winter season, they had ingredients which is basically sweet. They had a lot of sour things along with salted, oily, and hot in potency. If you look at the summer food, what one of my colleagues from Brazil talked about, where he gets mostly summer, he didn't add a lot of sauerkraut. He added less meat. He gave more things which were more spicy, easy to digest, because in summer season, you have to eat which is sweet, little oily, and cool in potency, where you take a lot of vegetables which are in the summer season. Now, this basic algorithm of Ayurvedic dietetics is based on, first is, how is your metabolism doing in that season? If you look at most of the cold country, they have heavy food. They eat a lot of meat, they eat a lot of fat, they eat a lot of tubers. Why? Because they are heavy to digest. So their whole all the recipes, like you saw from Latvia, they were talking about a lot of grains and tubers which are, you know, lacto-fermented, fermented for the winter, and then they cook it along with these tubers, and then they eat in the winter. Or in meat also, they eat in the winter along with the sauerkraut, which is again a amla rasa. So what you are seeing is that the whole concept of Ayurvedic Ritucharya has been followed across different cultures, and specifically all those ancient culture and civilization which I talked to you about or showed you had this insight. Now, there's a very simple thing. In all the tradition, what we are doing just opposite now in a modern lifestyle is, your appetite is the best during the day. So your meal during the day or lunch should be the heaviest, and the dinner should be lightest. Now, across all traditional culture, it was the norm, but we are going, because of our modern lifestyle, we are eating more heavy dinner, and that is creating a lot of modern day lifestyle issues. So one thing which we have to go back to our traditional lifestyle is eat heavier, that we can see in Turkish breakfast. Now, another important thing is, you can maintain a good lifestyle and good diet that will lead to avoiding all kinds of metabolic disorders, cancer, autoimmune disease, which are all there, which is part of your traditional dietetics, which when we don't follow. Now, an Italian eating pizza is fine, but an Indian eating pizza every day is not fine, because your genotype is not programmed. So it's called as prakriti. Your body is not programmed to eat like that. So first thing is, you have to wake up on time, sleep on time, have a good meal timing, and eat according to your genomic structure. Now, second thing is, if you are eating heavy, eat half the quantity what you generally can eat. And if you are eating light food, then you can eat more than half quantity. Now, another important thing was, which across the globe you can see, is gut is a way to your human behavior. That means if you eat proper probiotics, that is, if you look at any tradition, whether Indian, Mediterranean, or you go to South American or European as such, everywhere this sauerkraut or yogurt or ayran, whatever name, yoga, dahi in India or chach in India, everywhere this is taken care of. Why? Because as I was telling you, it shapes up the gut microflora, not only helps us in digestion, but also it helps us to, now we are talking about in, you know, Scandinavian country, people suffer from winter depression. Now, why? Because they forgot eating sauerkraut because of the modern diet day lifestyle, because everybody is eating pizza and burger, or everybody is eating other food which is not local, and this is creating a lot of mental health issues also. Then what to eat when is very well defined, and what is the combination, and then quantity of food. See, always eat 60% of your quantity what you can eat. As Dr. Gangadharan has told you, calorie restriction and restricted and intermittent fasting has been given Nobel Prize of Medicine. And this is probably Ayurvedic books were the first to state, and across tradition. In fact, if you look at European tradition, they used to eat 2 meals main. If you look at even Turkish tradition, they used to eat 2 meals, a big brunch and a light dinner in the night. So these across the whole gamut of civilization, you see these kind of trends which helps you to have a balanced lifestyle. So you eat most of the time in the day when there is a light phase, fast when it is a dark phase, and this improves your immunity and your, so these are basically the all the presentation what you have seen has this concepts behind them. Now coming to specifically Turkey, very short, if you look at the Turkish tradition, why I say Turkish tradition is very close to Indian, because you see the Persian and Indian civilization had a lot of interaction of thought processes, and the first important 3 important ingredients of Ayurveda is Shamana Aushadha is honey, tila, the sesame, and the ghee. Even honey is so universal that all our presenters had talked about honey. And in Ayurveda, one of the best Shamana Aushadha, the thing which balances the kapha, is honey. Tila or sesame seeds or sesame oil. In Turkish tradition, tila or tahin, it is called as tahini. They use sesame paste early in the morning, especially with honey. They eat as a regular breakfast intake. Now, and tila is one of the best Vatahara Shamana Aushadha. In order to balance Vata, tila or sesame is one of the best. Now, see, if you look at the first chapter of Ashtanga Hridayam itself, this is talked about honey, tila, and ghee is best for pitta. So, in fact, we were so surprised to see that the tradition of making ghee was so much prevalent in Persian as well as Turkish and even Balkan countries, in the where Slovenia is having a little influence of that also. So ghee or butter was always part of a staple diet. Now you see, these are the, in the first chapter of Ashtanga Hridayam, these are said to be as the best shamana or pacifying dietetics or even pacifying therapy. It is a therapy. So if you want to balance 3 doshas, these 3 important ingredients should be there in your diet, which is, I see also in almost most of our presenter talked about honey definitely and ghee secondly. Of course, tila, the sesame can change according to some places they use sunflower seed, some places they use linseeds as a option for Vatahara as a Vata reducing herb. But we see that use of this kind of practices is across tradition and across country. Again, an important contribution of Ayurveda I see is a brinjal. We say eggplant, baklajan, patlajan, different countries eggplant. Now, you all know that India is said to be as one of the originator of baklajan or brinjal or eggplant. Now, in India, in 16th century book called as Chem Kautuhala, there's a very unique recipe told with meat and brinjal as one of the combinations. I was so surprised that similar kind of combinations are used in Turkish tradition. In Turkey, they make brinjal, the eggplant and meat together, or beans and meat together. These kind of, we have seen that some of our Brazilian presenters also talked about beans and meat together eating. So we do found such kind of combination told in 16th century book called as Chem Kautuhala. Another important thing is we talk about that bread is the culture of, generally if you go to any Turkish recipe online, Somit, there you'll see a Turkish bread, round Turkish bread with some kind of sesame on it. But that unfortunately is not their traditional diet. In fact, that is an influence of Balkan or European influence on Turkish diet. In fact, if you look at their own diet or their traditional bread, different regions had different bread. Like for example, Yufka, it's a kind of a little fermented, slightly fermented bread. Then Gozlume, again, it is not at all fermented. It is made out of the wheat filled with, like how we make filled with aloo paratha and then gobi paratha. It's only filled, and they fill a lot of herbs along with cheese, and then they just roast it on the fire on a tawa. Or lavash is very similar to as our chapati, or pide. They are all very similar to. So if you look at even in Turkey, the north part, which is close to Black Sea, they use misir ekmek. We say it's a corn bread. They use freshwater fish, but the south of Turkey, they use a sea fish. Now, each country, according to the climate they have, according to the condition they have, they use different, and it exactly follows the Ayurvedic principles in at the basic level. Then another important thing was use of milk product. Now there is a lot of misinformation about use of milk. Now the problem is, if you use A2 organic cow milk or A2 milk, there's no problem. And if you see across the whole spectrum of civilization, Iran, that we say kind of yogurt and different byproducts of yogurt and cheese were used as a staple probiotic across the civilization. So this is another important thing. We say in our tradition, we say takra or chach, and there in Turkish tradition, the same way they use is the Iran. Another important thing was wine. So you know, in Indian tradition, always a traditional wine was made with a fruit juice and a spice. In fact, if you look at most of the traditional wines, which except Russian wine, where vodka, in fact, there also they add some herbs. But what I'm saying is, if you see in Turkish tradition, especially rakka, there is a wine which they take basically with meat. Even in Ayurvedic text, it's always told that the anupana, the drink which you have to take along with meat, is always should be a wine. And then anise flavored rakka, they say. And in European tradition, you'll find many types of fermented spiced wines. Now, there are also, last thing which I want to talk to you about, recipes. If you see in Turkish tradition, there are a lot of recipes called as kofta. In Indian tradition, in the book, which is again Chhaum Kautala, it's called as vataka. Puri, in Hindi what we call, is nothing but in tradition, they eat borek. You know, borek they fill in some fillings in that and then make like a puri. Or another important thing is Shudh Udakaha. Shudh Udakaha means something which will improve your appetite, or you can take it along with your food. That is in Turkish tradition also called as sharbat. Sharbat or kompot. In Russian tradition, in Europe, you see kompot they will use. Now, this kind of, if you look at, I was talking to you, all these recipes which are told in 16th century text has a very well kind of similarity with these kind of traditional dietetics. And from our presentation of the colleagues, we can very well understand that at some point of time, all these civilization had been talking to each other. So Ayurveda, the thought process is global. Though we may have recipes locally followed, but the thought process was quite local. Whenever I go across from India, south of India, you see more spicy because it's hot country. You more in summer season, you see the countries which are hot, humid, they eat more spicy food, because the thumb rule is when it is summer, your Agni or metabolism is low. So you have to take little more spice to keep up the metabolism. When you go to a cold country, because of the climate, your Agni will be more, your metabolism will be more. So you have to eat more heavy food. But when you eat heavy, something should be added as a probiotic always too. So you have a lot of cheese, lot of fermented food along with the meat eating, or even the alcohol. So what I'm trying to say in short is there has been a very strong conceptual similarity between these traditional thought process, and we need more kind of research, more kind of exchange of thoughts, more kind of collaborative work on dietetics, and try to understand that how Ayurvedic functional dietetics can give a very unique perspective in understanding diet, which is universal in appeal, which is more functional, not just we are counting the calorie. Thank you.
So thank you, sir. We'll just have a very small Q&A session. Since we have all the panels here, I'm just quickly going on to the questions. So the question first to Ms. Larisa. Is it wrong to eat quinoa if not washed properly and still bitter?
Good question. I wouldn't say it's wrong. I wouldn't think of it in terms of being wrong or not. Actually, quinoa is washed as the same way rice or wheat is washed when we cook it. If we think quinoa in terms of its properties or in terms of its tastes from the Ayurveda perspective, it's sweet and astringent. So it's madura and kashaya. So I don't think it's wrong to wash it, to take the bitter out of it, because it's actually not its main rasa or its main quality, but it's something that it's going to not make it so tasty, let's say in the good sense. I don't know if I'm clear with what I mean. I mean, by taking this bitter taste of quinoa when we wash it, we are not taking out its main qualities or taste or rasa, but just cleaning it up. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Ms. Larisa. We now have the question for Ms. Bojana. It's like how Jota, hope I'm pronouncing it correct, Yota, right? How Yota can increase probiotics in gut?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. It's like all the fermented foods, it contains a lot of probiotics. And I know that they made a study and they actually found that sauerkraut in Yota, I mean, I'm talking about sauerkraut, not Yota, sauerkraut. It actually, it contains like 28 different strains of probiotics, of bacteria. So I think that's what helps the process.
Okay. So the question last we asked to Dr. Somit, since it was from Latvia, actually it was related with the video that we saw from Latvia. He's more experienced in being in Latvia. So the question was like some clarity on the berries of Latvia, on the usage of berries.
Yeah, so I think everybody knows only strawberry as berry. In fact, the strawberries which we eat right now is genetically modified strawberry. The real strawberry is called as wild strawberries. And so they are very small. They are sweet and bitter. So if you're talking about real strawberry, which is forest strawberry, it is sweet and bitter. So that is the native strawberry breed, because the hybrid variety which we grow in the garden is sweet and sour. So according to dosha wise, this is totally different. In fact, the hybrid variety will increase pitta, but the natural variety will reduce pitta. So first is that. Second thing is there are also cranberries are there, blueberries are there in Latvia. And there are some other, so there are two different varieties of berry, which are basically, they first in the summer is more kind of, the summer berries are more sour. And then why? Because see, when the heat of the summer acts on the fruit, then the winter berries, the autumn berries become sweeter. Even the apples which you harvest in the summer season in European countries sour, but when you harvest it in the autumn, then you get sweet taste. So these are some common berries which we see, and especially blueberries are very kind of sweet, and cranberries have, I say, from our experience, we have seen that cranberry is having similar property as amalaki in Ayurveda, because it has all the 6 tastes except lavana. So that way, when people ask me what is the European or Western variety option for cranberry, for amalaki, amala, then we always talk about cranberries in that perspective. So these are broadly there. There are some berries which are very good for, I don't remember now the local name, but then there is a berry which is very good for blood pressure and cardiovascular conditions. So these are now, why they don't have those varieties, because they have, as I told, they told that they have only 2 months of or 3 months of sunlight. So obviously the quality of flora and fauna would be very limited. And also, see, the big, very important thing, Sashti Shalika, you know, Sashti, 60 days. See, even in our tradition, the rice in 60 days, which are, you know, pakwa is one of the best. So somehow nature has given that 2 months for them also, you know, to, you know, ripe their buckwheat. But then what they did, they kept in go-down for at least 3 to 4 months to dry. And that was our tradition also. So our Ayurvedic thought process also, that this year harvested rice should be used next year. Why? As we know, that will be leading to less calorific surge. As we know that in Nava Anna is very bad for metabolic disorders. If you use freshly harvested, like diabetes, obesity, these all are predominant, and textually it has been told. And there are a lot of study that how sugar, gross sugar turns into starch granule, and then you have low glycemic intakes of those. That we can discuss later. So what I'm saying is, all these countries had a very strong sense of the 5 element theory. I just wanted to say you here, Nityarupa was showing you some, you know, some traditional culture in which they were standing around the fire. Did you see in her presentation? This is midnight summer festival. And you know what they do? First they pray sun, that is Agni. Then they make, if you see from there, a garland of leaves, they had made a structure, a swastik sign, a sacred sign. That is what? That is the space they create. And then they have a wood, the earth element, and then they put, you know, in this all the newly harvested wheat or something what is harvested, and then 9 different herbs are put into it, and water is put into it. And they say that now this is I don't want to be categorical, but this was pre-Christian culture of Baltic countries, Scandinavian countries. Now this is still they have preserved, and these 5 element, you know, there are sacred spots in Baltic countries, and even Bojana will know in Slovenia there are sacred rocks. They you know, pray based on these 5 elements. So they say that power of this 5 element is there. So what I'm trying to say is, at some level of kind of, you know, conceptual level, there has been lot of kind of interaction of our Vedic thought process with the whole world. So as I told you, Veda is knowledge. Knowledge is not of a single country. It's for the humankind. Knowledge is for everybody. So I think that kind of, once we travel, we see a lot of similarities, which from an Ayurvedic perspective, I have been seeing when I travel in every month from India to Scandinavia and back. So at least I can talk about, and my you know, colleagues to other countries. Thank you.
So thank you. So we're just closing the Q&A session now, though we have so much questions because we're running short of time and we already crossed the limit. Over to you, Rahulji.
Thank you, Aramya. And well, it's been a fascinating discussion. And in a way, if I had to sum up what we've done this evening, I would say that we probably began with an exposition in Guru Vyavhar, and in the second session we moved to Laghu Vyavhar, as to which was more entertaining and which was more enlightening. It's up to you to decide, but I'm very delighted to see that I think the connections between Jaivik and Aahara were well established thanks to the efforts of all the panelists, to whom I am on behalf of my center and also on behalf of the consortium of Indic Academy. We are very, very, very gratified to see that, because I think this establishes this connection very clearly, and I hope we are able to build on it. I'm going to take the privilege given with this last word, and since I live in Goa, which was once a Portuguese colony, a special message to our panelists from Brazil. Bruno e Antonio, obrigado. Ficamos muito satisfeitos em saber da vossa cultura. And one more thing, Bruno and Antonio, feijoada is still cooked and eaten in Goa, and some of the hardcore Goans do import bacalhau because they can't do without it. And this really shows that our ethnobotany is so tied up with spirituality that it probably gives us good scope for another session altogether. I would like again to thank my colleagues in the Indic Academy Consortium for putting this all together. Without the expertise of ABP, of course, it wouldn't have been possible. Dr. Somit, Dr. Aramya, thank you so much. To all the participants, my deepest gratitude, and do come back whenever we expand on this and get together on this wonderful topic again. Thank you all very much, and good night.